Hello guys, and welcome back to a very long overdue layout update. It's been 4 or 5 months since my last layout update, and over the course of those 4 months I have got a lot of stuff done on the layout. I know I've really struggled to get a layout update out on YouTube for you guys. It's just been quite a chaotic last few months, being back in school and working on the layout, and just with all that combined, there's not a whole lot of time to do a video. But without any further ado, I'll take you through the room and show you what I've completed over the last few months, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up the video, so stay tuned. So I really don't know where to start with you guys to show you the progress. There's been so much completed over the last few months, but we'll go ahead, start here in a nice and simple place. And basically, since the last layout update, I have installed the backdrop. I screwed it in place, plastered over all the holes, covered the gaps between the pieces with drywall tape and plaster, and sanded that all down, and now it's painted and ready to go. I chose this blue. It's a very temporary, because I've come to the final conclusion that I'm going to be going with a photorealistic backdrop, either a photorealistic backdrop or some sort of printout that I'll apply to the backdrop pieces that I already have installed. It's just going to be a lot easier. There's also a few other problems that are coming up with the backdrop, and I'm hoping to hide them with this photorealistic backdrop. But now let's flip to the other side here, and I'll show you what I've done to the branch line. So on the branch line side, as you can see, I have the gate installed. I don't know if I ever went over that, but there's foam on top of the gate now, as well as cork, and then the cork continues around, and now we start getting into where I've laid down the track and secured it in place. So this is all in place with the exception of any place that I have these printed turnout templates. They're 1:1 scale or 1:87 scale for HO purposes. Basically, I've laid the track right over top of those templates, and the track, as you can see, is very loose. It's just sitting on top, like I said, and when I go by the turnouts, once I get the turnouts and all that sort of stuff, I'll just cut the track to the perfect size I need, and then just drop the turnouts in place. I'm not soldering any joints on my turnouts, just in case I have any problems with them, and when I go to install tortoise switch machines a little bit later, it'll be less of a hassle to unsolder all the joints, and like I said, just makes it overall easier for maintenance and repair. So continuing all the way around, and I've laid track and secured the cork as well as the track on top all the way down the branch line all the way to the far end there, which will reposition the camera soon here. Just wanted to go over what I did with the backdrop here. So same as what I was doing for the last backdrop that I showed you just previously. Painted it blue, but I'm going to end up going with a photorealistic backdrop. And basically this measurement, or the width of the backdrop that I painted right there, is the width of, or where the upper level, if there was an upper level on this wall, that's where it would sit. So that's where I got that sort of measurement from, for where it goes from blue to the white paint there. And it's just large enough that if I'm filming, you won't see any of the wall unless I'm doing a wide angle instead of a close-up. But I'll go ahead and reposition the camera, and we'll show you further down the branch line there. So now we're at the other end of the branch line, and as you can see, I've continued to lay the track, and that's all secured, as well as the cork for the siding there. I don't have any track laid in that siding yet, just because I don't have the switches just yet. So we continue all the way around here. This will all be scenic, kind of rolling hills, be some rivers in there, that sort of thing, and continue all the way around into the main portion of the layout. So we'll reposition the camera yet again and continue following the track all the way around. So before we follow the track the rest of the way around the layout, or to where I have it completed, just like to go over some of the bench work and other miscellaneous jobs that I've completed since the last layout update. The gates, I had to do a little bit of fixing up or tweaking to do, because when you close them, they sat really tight to the layout. They didn't swing very freely. You really had to push them to get them open. So I had to lift them up a little bit and drill new holes for the hinges and move it around just a little bit. But the other thing I had to do is, when I was building the layout, somehow I managed to go down an inch. Well, I think went down half an inch. The yard section went down half an inch, and on the other side of the gate went up half an inch. It was all gradual, so it's not a big deal. But now what I have to do is, for the gate, I have to have a small grade on the gate, and I'm using these Woodland Scenics risers. Now, they aren't the cheapest thing in the world for foam, but I will say it has made the job so much easier, and especially when I get to the upper level where I've used a lot of these, it's made the job go so much faster and so much easier, and there's so much less guessing to determine if the grade is right or not. These are 2% risers, so they go up a half inch every 2 feet, and basically I've used these a lot throughout the layout, but when I do the grade on the other side, I'll just use these risers to start me off, and then after that I'll start doing my own risers out of plywood and 2x4s. That way I know I'll have the gradient at the right percentage. But swinging around here, since the last layout update, I have completed all the backdrops on this side, as you can, or you probably already saw in the opening clip. And basically same idea. On my last layout update, I was touching base on how I was securing the backdrops, and I was experiencing a little bit of warping because the material was so thin, so I had to put all those backboard pieces in between the upright studs, and I screwed the backdrop to those as well as the upright studs to keep the backdrop nice and straight. So that's all completed. The backdrop's in place, screwed in place, plastered over. Same spiel as the last clip there that I showed you on the backdrop on the other side for the grade. And I have, well, the backdrop's all complete. And again, I'm going to be using photorealistic backdrops on this side too. Now, one reason why I'm going photorealistic backdrops is I'm experiencing some issues with expansion and contraction, which I'll go ahead and show you right now. So there's 4 areas like this around the layout where the drywall tape has started to crack and crumble and become all distorted, and I think the main reason is due to expansion and contraction. There's gaps between the masonite hardboard backdrop, but with the tape in there, when they expand, it made the tape bubble, and it cracked all of the plaster that I put over top. So I'll go ahead and show you the other areas on the upper level that I'm experiencing these issues. So just like the one on the lower level, I have one there, and a little further down is one there. Now, they all had the exact same problem where the drywall tape started to crack and crumble and peel off. Now, I watched quite a few videos on how to do it, and I did it just like those videos told me, and it worked out fine. And where I taped up, most of the other areas are fine, but in the very long stretches, like this wall here, is all flat compared to the lower level down here where it has a break in it. I've found is where I've been getting these issues, and I think it's partially due to the fact that this room isn't climatized. It stays warm during the winter because there's heaters on the shop floor below me, and then the heat rises up here, and in the summer the skylights let a lot of the sunlight in, which traps the heat in here. So it really never gets cold, but it also doesn't stay at a constant temperature. which is where I'm going to be running into issues and where I have ran into issues on my previous layout. So by going photorealistic backdrop and the big rolls of paper I'll get, it'll be much easier to just hide those gaps, because with paper you can have a lot less of a gap and it'll be a lot less noticeable in the end once it's all scenic, rather than having these big gaping cracks in the plaster by painting over it. So my hopes are that this photorealistic backdrop will kind of hide those issues. Now later on I'll probably go ahead and buy myself an AC unit, kind of like a smaller portable one that I can position in this room just to keep it a little cooler in here. I've even noticed while laying my track, when I run the track over top of the template, I don't glue it down like I said previously, and once that track has been glued in place, then I'm starting to see where the rails are expanding, and where I put the track over the templates, the track no longer stays straight. It starts to bow out a little bit, or bow in towards the backdrop, because the rails have expanded due to the heat up here. The track is not, or nowhere nearly as bad as on my last layout, because I've siliconed it down, but I am still running into those issues, so I'll probably need to do something about it in the near future by obtaining an AC unit, even though it's in the middle of winter. So we'll continue on by showing you what else I've got completed. So following the track there, this track here leads off to the branch line, which is where we left off last, and then it comes in and joins in with the double main line. Right there it joins in with a number 8 Pico turnout. I'm going to have a combination of turnouts on the layout. Some will be Walthers, the ones that I already had, and Pico. So I actually like the Pico turnouts a lot due to the snap motion, but I'll probably mostly go with Walthers because I have a majority of Walthers turnouts already and I've seen good results with them. Anyhow, continuing down here, all this track is glued in place and secured and as straight as what I can get it, and I'll show you how straight it is in just a moment here and how I get it so straight. But the track is glued down all the way down to that small peninsula there and onto the other side, which I'll go ahead and reposition my camera so we can show you the rest. So picking up where we left off on the track here, so I have all this track glued down all the way around past this Gevo unit and all the way down to the turnout templates. That track is all secured and glued in place. Now you're probably wondering what the heck is with all this canned food, and forget whose video it was that I watched on track laying, but he actually used canned food as weights. I've also found another excellent use for the canned food in track laying, and that is how I get my track straight. I use a 4-foot level for starters. I'll show you how I get the track straight with that, and then I'll use the canned food just to make it even a little more straight. Sounds a little funny, a little bit weird, but I'll show you how it's done in just a second here. Now just by looking at the track, you can probably tell that it's pretty straight. I think it's pretty much as straight as I can get it. I've done a lot of messing around with it and different techniques to get the track as straight as it is. I mean, maybe some of you might not think that it's as straight as you can get it, but compared to my last layout, I see a very, very large improvement, and that's mainly to do with the fact that I'm siliconing my track down instead of nailing it down with all the little Atlas nails. Those were a pain in the ass. But how I lay my track is I'll run a bead of silicone, clear silicone, right down the middle of the cork, and I'll fan it out with a putty knife or something, or a straight edge, to get a nice consistent layer over the cork. It doesn't need to be a lot, it doesn't need to be a thick layer, just a very clear thin film, or just enough that it will keep the track secure. Now, after that, I'll take the level and I'll put one of the straight edges on the inside of the rail. Maybe this rail here will be a better demonstration. But I'll put it on the inside of the rail, and what I'll do, because once you lay the track on top of the silicone, it won't be straight just by putting it down by hand. So what I'll do is I'll put my hand on either side and I just give it a slight tug on the rail, or on the level, and that will bring it'll make the rail completely straight for this 4-foot section. Now this level is not resting right up against the rail. What it's actually resting on is the plastic spikes. I find if I try to rest it right up against the rail, it gets a little too finicky. Me trying to balance it up in the air and so on and so forth. It'll just make the rail even less straight. So what I do is I have it just lay right on the ties, and I have it pressed right up against the plastic ties, seeing as how they're all relatively the same thickness and whatnot. So that gets it really straight, and as I move on, I'll only go a half length longer down the track. So I'll start off with a 4-foot section, and then I'll continue on and I'll only straighten a 2-foot section. That way I know that it's going to be in line with the previous 4-foot section. And I'll do that. It'll get it pretty straight, but then next I come with my canned food, and I'll lay it right in the center of the track, and I'll get a whole bunch of them, just putting on a few now for demonstration purposes. And then I'll just glide it back and forth. Now, because the cans are cylindrical, they all have the same center of gravity, or however you want to, whatever you want to look at it as. But they all sit perfectly centered in the middle of the track. So by stacking a bunch of these up, I think I have like 10, 15 cans, put 10 cans on the track at a time and push it back and forth slowly, you're going to slowly start to get all the kinks out of the track. Now this area here isn't secured because obviously it's template, but on the areas where the plastic ties are already into the silicone, the ties don't move much. It's the rails that will move a little bit, especially the one side that flexes. And it'll get all the little kinks out of the rails, and it'll just make it a little more straight. It's not a huge difference, but it just gives it a little more of a perpendicular line. And that's how I've got my best results laying straight track. It takes a little bit of messing around, but on average, probably this whole section here that you're looking at track level took me 10 minutes per rail to get it straight. That's if my full attention is into this. Some nights I just can't. I can't get it seem to get ever straight. But that's how I found my best results. Feel free to use that. I mean, it's not the most exciting technique in the world, but certainly one that I found that works and that I'm quite happy with. So let's continue. So looking at track once again, this section here is quite messy, as you can tell, lots of tools all over the place, and that's because this was the last section of track that I laid. Now, these last two pieces of flex track on either main line are not secured in any way, shape, or form, really. And I keep the last section of soldered track completely separated from the cork. No adhesive, no pins or anything holding them in place. It just makes it a lot easier for when I go to solder the next rail or section of flex track onto it. I have a lot more maneuverability with that rail if I need to go back and cut some ties or whatever, basically. So the way that I lay track, and that I have found is the most efficient way to lay track, is I'll take these 5 section bundles, or whatever you want to call them. That gives you 15 feet of track. Now, out of this 15 feet of track, I'll solder all of these pieces together in one go. And an important thing to just kind of look over is the way that you should solder track just to make it more smooth for your corners and just smooth in general is you should offset your joints like this. So you should never have the joints together in the same spot, because it gets a little bit complicated in curves. They start kinking in the corners and whatnot. So what I've been doing is I have been offsetting all of the rails, because on flex track you obviously have the one movable rail, and the joints are always offset by 1.5 to 2 inches. That way when you go into corners you don't kink and it just flows a lot smoother. I'll do probably a how-to video on how to solder track and lay it, and I'll show you how I do it a little more in depth than just this layout update. For time purposes, we'll move on and I'll show you the upper level and what's going on up there. So unfortunately my tripod isn't quite as tall as me, so it's kind of hard to see the upper level when the camera's on the tripod, so I have to freehand this portion. But back there, nothing's going on yet, but there has been a change in plans. Originally I was going to put a second intermodal yard right in that spot there for the lower level intermodal yard to go somewhere and intermodal traffic be delivered somewhere, that sort of thing. Now I have scrapped that idea and I'm now going to go with either a paper plant or a pulp mill. I'll go a little bit in depth on that when I come closer to when I start laying track. Anyway, looking at the main line here, this is the swing bridge. Opens and closes like so. This track here is the main line, which goes down the upper level there. That'll be the yard eventually. But this track, or cork right here, will go off to the other side of the backdrop and down the hill eventually. And same issue as the bottom level, as you can probably tell, I've had to put in risers because there's a little bit of a height difference in the benchwork. However, continuing up, it goes up 2% grade here, and then we come over to a set of crossovers. Basically, the trains coming up the grade and onto the upper level will have to take the turnout and onto the main line, because this is the main line here. After these switches, this turns into a siding. And I put a siding in here for the pulp mill, or for the future pulp mill / paper mill, and for the fact that the entire upper level, with the exception of this one portion here, is single track. So if a train comes up the grade, there's bound to be another train that's coming the opposite direction and wants to go down the grade. So one of the trains will have to hold in this area here. Either track, doesn't really matter, but of course this is your siding and you want to keep the main line open. So the train will come up and one of the trains will either have to wait or take the siding, etc. Once I get into operating sessions, that will become more relevant. But it comes back together here, and right after the switch starts climbing again, and a total of a 3-inch climb basically. This is all 2%, and this is where these risers, these Woodland Scenics risers, have really come in handy. For me to sit here and silicone a bunch of 2x4 pieces and lay plywood on top and screw the plywood and silicone it again would just take me forever. I probably wouldn't even be near track right now if I had to do that. So the Woodland Scenics risers helped out a ton at this section here, being that there's a grade and a height differential and all that sort of thing, or stuff rather. It did take a while for me to cut out all the foam and shape it properly and get the proper radiuses and whatnot, but the risers just made that go so much quicker. I really do appreciate that system, and I do highly recommend it if you have lots of small grades or ups and downs on your layout, that sort of thing. So kind of looking bird's eye view here, you can see that the cork and eventually the track will really kind of snake in through here. There'll be a bunch of tunnels and bridges and whatnot. This whole wall is going to be a mountain range, basically. In this peninsula up top here, that'll be a flood loader for coal trains and whatnot. And there'll be a grade that goes back up. But there'll be lots of mountain scenery, lots of trees, lots of rock cuts, lots of tunnels, that sort of thing. That's where most of my mountain scenery will be. And then when you come to this point, now you start going down grade, and you continue down grade all the way around. And this is basically where the town is going to be. So you come out of Dynamics right through town. There'll be brewery back there, of course, and swing around. Basically, eventually there's going to be a large bridge here, kind of mimicking the Revelstoke Bridge. And just like in Revelstoke, right after the bridge will come the yard. So the yard switch will be probably right about here, and it'll branch off to about 4 or 5 tracks or so. And those tracks will mainly be holding tracks, or kind of staging tracks, and then there will be 1 or 2 that are for switching, because the freight will come from the lower level to the upper level, and then especially for the pulp mill, which will take a ton of cars, the train that comes from the lower level to the upper level yard will have to be taken apart, switched into different trains, and then there will be 1 long train or 2 shorter trains that will have to go back to that pulp mill and switch it out. But basically, same idea as the lower level, the yard. There will be a little engine shop in here. Now originally, oh, camera's going out of whack. Originally, along the backdrop here, there was going to be a bunch of industries, like a paper mill and a small ethanol plant. I've changed that because I feel like there's going to be too many switches and it's going to be too complicated in the end to have to reach over all the yard tracks and uncouple cars and whatnot. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a siding in the back here, and that's going to be for a Via Rail. It's going to be strictly for Via Rail, and it's going to be a large passenger siding and station platform for the upper level. So there will be passenger service on this layout. There will also be a station on the lower level. Unfortunately, it's going to have to be on the main line, but that doesn't bother me too much. So that's just how it'll be. And again, just kind of a recap on the lower level here. All the big engine shops will be in there. Lots of arrival departure tracks and maintenance of way and repair and place tracks will be in here. And then the Via Rail station is going to be right there along the backdrop. So like I said, it'll be on the main line, but then again, that doesn't really bother me. So besides what else has been going on in the layout, I've been kind of picturing things and how the track layouts will work, and just overall looking at my options as to what I can do with the space that I've provided. And I've come to the conclusion that I'm going to change a few things just because it'll make more sense in the end, and some of the things aren't really needed, that sort of thing. So we'll start off in this little dugout, cove, whatever you want to call it. Was originally going to be a lumber mill. Lots of space back there to do a lumber mill and lumber transloading and that sort of thing. However, in order for the track layout to work in this section, for the track that goes to the branch line and the track that goes up the grade and the main lines and the switches that come off here for my intermodal and coal unloading, which I'll get to in a minute, it wouldn't work, because now I have to start the grade all the way back here where that switch template is along the backdrop right in there, and I have to start the grade right off that switch, and the grade will go up around that corner all the way up, and right where the cork you see goes to the backdrop, there will be a flyover or a bridge there where the track that goes towards the grade will go over top of that, will go over top of the track that leads to the branch line. This helps in the end by making the grade less steep on the other side. It also cuts down on the amount of switches and tracks and all that sort of stuff in the area. Like originally on the plan, I think I had a switch going into the coal or the intermodal yard, a switch going off to the branch line, another switch going to the climb, and a double crossover in there. And that's almost 10. That's like 10 switches almost, just alone in that one area. One, I don't have as much space as what the plans said I would have, because it's always different on paper, right? And it's so now I don't have as much space as I originally thought I would on the plan. So I had to back a few things up and I had to change them around. And in the end, it's going to look more realistic because unless you're in a yard, really, they don't have like 10 switches just for crossovers and whatnot, unless it's like a main junction or whatever. But just for operation purposes and just in the end, it'll probably make everything run a lot smoother, less complicated. I decided to spread things out. So now, let me get to the where the lumber mill is going to go. So in the original plan, right here, there is supposed to be potash unloading, kind of in the back, right along the main line, and a coal unloader, rotary dumper, right at the front there. Now, one of those is prototypical, run-through track where the coal is unloaded, and the other one, not so much. The potash unloading is a little more complicated. It takes a lot more time, and it's not like a coal train where it just kind of runs through, that sort of thing, dumps and goes. And it, for those two industries to unload, it takes up a fair chunk of the layout. Like it starts from right here, and it would tie back into the main line up there. So it's a fair portion of the layout just for those two industries, and I really don't need them. I mean, the coal unloading is going to be relocated, but the potash I really don't need, and because I really don't have anywhere to load the potash unless I use the grain silo on the branch line as a multi-purpose depending on the operating session. I'll just probably turn potash into a run-through traffic, kind of one of those trains that you just throw in there to run around, that sort of thing. So now the lumber mill is going to go here. I have lots of room to work with it. I probably won't end up using the whole area because I don't want the entire lower level to be all industry. I'll use a good chunk, and the rest will just be a scenic portion of the layout. Now, as for the coal unloading, I'll show you where I am going to be relocating that. So previously I said that there was a switch that would come off the main line and it would wrap around into this section here. And that was originally, this entire area here was supposed to be for intermodal. There would be two arrival departure, and then there was 4 stub end tracks to store intermodal cars. Now, the way I'm doing it, to make it more efficient, train running, and just to kind of compact things, what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to have 2 run-through tracks. So the switch will come off back here where my finger is in the corner, and it will wrap around, and the intermodal tracks will come along the front. And there'll be 2 of them just for loading, unloading. So when an intermodal train comes in, it'll unhook from the set of cars it has, and then it'll run light engine, and then it'll hook up to the stack of cars that are in the track over, and then it'll pull out and continue its journey. Behind that, so approximately in this gap here, will be the coal unloading. There will be 1 run-through track, and there will be a rotary coal dumper, and that's how the coal will be unloaded. Now normally they don't have intermodal and coal unloaded like right beside each other. Roberts Bank, for those of you who are in BC or Delta Port, there is intermodal and coal unloading both in the same terminal, but they're kind of segregated. They're not really that close together to each other. The coal has its own large portion and the intermodal has its own large portion, and they're kind of separated in that way. But just for condensing purposes and just making things run smoother and cutting down on switches and trackage, I feel that this is just the best way to go with it, even though it's not necessarily prototypical. Well guys, that pretty much wraps up this layout update. Sorry, it's probably getting pretty long by now, and for that I'd like to thank you for sticking with me and sticking with me through the dry spell. I was going to show you the trains running this layout update, but I can really only run it back and forth, and I have to add some jumper cables in there because there's insulation joints, so when I go to wire it, it'll be in blocks. And I figured that just running it back and forth in somewhat of a straight line isn't quite as engaging as it running in a full loop. So hopefully next layout update I'll have trains running to show you guys, and yeah, that pretty much wraps up this layout update. Thanks again for sticking with me, and don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Have any questions? I'll be more than happy to answer them. Thanks guys.